Okay, this one has to go opposite. The legs mirror each other. So you have to make sure you have a left foot and a right foot, or a right foot and a left foot. If you screw up with these, you're just gonna have to flip them around. So you have to flip this over and do everything we just did here, but you do it with the other leg. If you have a little bit of excess, just with your scissors you can trim it away. The next process is to grid, and then it will be to stuff, tape, and paper mache. So this has a pretty sharp end right here. So what I did is I just put a long piece right across here and then I wrapped it around. Obviously I put paper on every single exposed cardboard space. So I did that one. I did one just in the front here. I did one around the ankle. You should do that one too. And then I did one across the whole shoe. I'll do the same thing over here, and then it'll be time to stuff. So now it's time to start stuffing. Once it's stuffed, it's time to wrap tape around it. Now it's paper mache. Oh, if you were curious, these pieces, they are to form the bottom of the shoe. So obviously the smaller end goes towards the heel, and it will attach like that after being wrapped in tape, and that is to form the bottom of the shoe. And if you look at any reference, you'll see immediately what I'm talking about. So I'm going to tape it, and then I'll glue it, and then paper mache. So I'm actually going to paper mache it first and then glue it on. That way it stays as a clear division. I feel like if I glue it on, then paper mache it, we're gonna lose this separation. Yeah. And once that's done, that'll be the end of the video. Make sure you do 2 layers. This is only one. So 2 layers are on. Now I'm gonna officially glue this piece here to both shoes, and then I'm gonna take a piece of paper and I'm gonna crumple it up really tight, twist it, I'm gonna put tape all along the edge. And then once the tape is on there, I'm going to use that to create a little rim around the shoe. And if you look at any reference, you'll see exactly what that's for. So that rim that we're gonna make is right there, meaning to represent kind of like the top of the shoe. While you're creating that rim, it would be wise to just do an extra one for the top or the sides of the shell. So you're gonna do one for each foot and one for the shell, which I already did. When you're gluing the bottom on, try to avoid having any gaps in between. So I had a little gap form and I just added some extra hot glue, and now I'm squeezing it until that hot glue dries to try to make sure that there isn't a big gap there. If there is, I don't think it'll be a big problem. It's just, it looks better without it. So I filled the edges here with hot glue, the gaps, and I'll put glue over it later so I can paint over it. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the other foot. So that's what that ends up looking. I think it looks pretty good. I already rolled up that paper, but you want to cut off the ends so you get a nice connection. And I mean, cut one end, and you have to make sure this is as flexible as it can be. So you want to make sure that it's nice and flexible. And this is going to go around. So in that, right in that gap, and you're going to bring that around. And now you need to cut it again, kind of right there, so that it connects nicely. But just make sure that it's where you want it to be before you make that cut. So I'm just going to take note of where I want that cut. I'll just make a little mark, and now I'll cut it there. And that should be okay, so measure it again. And it's a little bit over, so I'm going to cut it again until the measurement is right. Just a little bit. Okay, now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to combine this here in the back, and since this area is pretty tight, I'm going to put it like this, and I'm just going to force it into that gap. Force it into that gap. And maybe I'm gonna do that again, but I'm gonna put some glue, and then ultimately I'll end up with something like that, which I think is pretty good. So I'm gonna put a little bit of glue here in the gap. And now I'm going to force that right in there, let that dry, and then as needed I'm going to put glue all around the edge, and obviously glue right there and where it combines. And then you want to do the same thing with the other one. So this is where we're at right now. I'm gonna go ahead and in all these gaps I'm just going to add some glue so it holds extra firm. It's not combining 100%, but I'm going to try to put a little glue there and hold that in place until it dries. And I'll continue all the way around the edge. And then I'll put a little bit of tape over that so it's less visible. Any edges that you have sticking out, like of hot glue, you can just use the tip of the glue gun to smooth them down. And I think in the end you should get something acceptable. So I'm going to take a little piece of tape. And just cover this edge. And it might be a good idea to just paper mache over. Actually, no, I'm not going to don't paper mache over it, because then you lose the quality of that separation, and it feels like one piece instead of two. Instead, I could just paper mache over this very specific area, but I think I'm just gonna remove it right now, just the excess. I have these in class. If you don't have your own, you just want to make that quick little cut there, and I'll do the same thing so I could remove the top and it'll just be one piece. There you go. Either way, we're definitely going to have to go over this with glue, solid glue. So at least we can paint over it and paint in the where the hot glue is. Now I'll do the other foot. The actual construction of the shoe and the foot is done. The leg. All that would be left is to apply a solid coat of glue along all of the edges that have been filled with hot glue, and the rim here. And remember to do the same thing to the edge of the shell up here, so you can paint over it and it'll take paint nicely. Now the next step is to actually put the foot in. So you want to take a good look at your reference so you know where to cut your hole. So, and get a pencil. I got my reference right here, so I know I need about that much space between the shell. So I'm gonna draw more or less where I'm going to cut. And you see that the leg back here, it doesn't go further back than the shell, but it kind of goes up to it. And over here in the front, it goes up to the shell a bit as well, but not past it this way. And now turn it over, and these guys are pretty thick, so I want to make sure that the leg isn't sticking out too much. So because of that, I am going to come in to about there. And this is always something that we can go in later and add more, like if we have to. So I do expect there to be a gap. And I kind of experimented on the other side, but I'm gonna draw the same thing on the other side. So draw the same thing on the other side. Once you draw that out, it's time to cut it out. So I recommend you use an X-Acto knife, just be very careful. And don't try to slice it, just more like stab it in pieces like that. And go all the way around. Once you cut all the way around, you want to take that piece off. And what we want to do actually is we're going to remove a lot of this stuffing. If not all of it. And we could put some of that back in later. But now it's time, you see this piece? You want to remove it completely. So just take that whole piece out. And your leg is going to go in there. More or less like that. But before we add the leg, you want to do the same thing on the other side. And then any little spaces that remain, you're going to fill them. But it's time to add some counterweights. So right now we're going to probably cut a hole in this piece and we're going to add our rocks in there. And if we have to, we'll cut a hole up here to add some rocks in here. So this whole back piece will hopefully be very heavy, and it'll, once the legs are in, it'll stop it from tipping forward. So that's the next step. You're going to do this to the other side as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just open up a space back here. And I think I'm going to draw out that space first. So all of these back compartments I want to fill with weight. I want them weighted. That way it'll balance. I don't think it's completely necessary, so but I want to make sure that when I add the arms it doesn't tip forward. So yeah. I've drawn out a section here that I'm going to cut out using the blade. And I'll pull it out just like I did these parts. So now you're going to pull some of this out. And in those empty spaces that remain, you're gonna go get some rocks and you're gonna put them in there. And then we'll probably put a little bit of this paper over and just cover it right back up. I think that's enough of a space right there. So I'm not gonna even bother about the tip. So I went ahead and I filled up that space with rocks. And now the remaining bit, I'm just gonna stuff this back in there as much as I can get. And then I'll put that cover back on. Now it's time to put the piece back. And then of course we're gonna paper mache over that. So I might just tape up this edge and then paper mache over it. But that's pretty good, and I think it's gonna add the weight that we need. Okay, so that's all sealed up. All that's left to do back there is to paper mache, but now I'm gonna start adding these legs. But there is a gap here, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to fill that gap with the paper, the same paper that I pulled out of there, and then I'm gonna glue this in right along the edge, and then I'll tape around it and then paper mache over that. So I'm gonna start by taking some of the paper that I had taken out before and just placing it right there, so that when this goes below, it fills. You see how it fills that gap? And I'm just gonna need a little bit more. So I added that paper in there, and then I went in and I taped it down, and that's gonna give me a bigger surface area for when I apply hot glue. And I actually put this thing in here. So now I'm gonna fill it all up with hot glue and all these contact areas and right along the edge, and I'm gonna try to fit the foot in there, the leg. And then around the edge I'll put some tape and paper mache over that. And obviously I'll do the same thing to the other side, which I haven't done yet, but I'll probably do the other side off camera. So I was finally able to attach the legs. There's this gap back here, but I think I'm gonna keep those gaps. I'm just gonna put a little tape like around the corner there. And definitely I'm gonna put some tape right here to cover that up. But I do want to make it clear that there's a distinction between the leg and the body, and I think that that gap is going to let me do that, because I want it to feel like it has mobility. I'm not going to, like, if I were just to cover that gap up, I don't think it would look bad, but if I cover it up or I stuff it and then I paper mache over it, it's just going to feel like the legs are coming out of it, and it's not going to feel as natural. So I'm going to leave that gap, and then I am going to paper mache up here, and I'm going to paper mache over that tape that we applied there. So yeah, I'm going to leave the gap. I'm going to tape over some areas that are exposed and the corner a bit, and I am going to paper mache over some areas like right here and around here, but I do want that gap in there. As small as it is, it's a little detail. And then after I do that, I think it'll be done. So I'll just show you how I'm gonna tape over a few areas, and then I'll paper mache, and then I'll call this video done. So I've gone ahead and taped up all of the areas that I said I would, keeping the gaps. And now all that's left to do is to paper mache, and the legs will be done. I mostly paper mache'd the areas that I've combined with tape, and when that dries completely, it's really going to strengthen it. I do want to give you like an upright view of this before I post the video, so I'm just gonna give you that upright view and the video will be done. And then the only thing will be left is the arms, and then we'll paint it, and that'll be it. So here's the upright view. And this video is done.